Five of the Best is an opinion-based series on films which I have seen released during the chosen year. This is to celebrate previous years in film, not to cause any offence. All opinions are my own.
Hi everyone, welcome to Five of the Best, a series in which we celebrate movies year by year. This series of videos will consist of me discussing my 5 favourite films of this chosen year. In this video we'll be celebrating the year of 2002, so let's get into it. Before we get into the top 5, here are a few honourable mentions from this year. 8 Mile, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Panic Room, Spider-Man, and 28 Days Later. Now, let's get on to the list and start with number 5. Signs is directed by M. Night Shyamalan and stars Mel Gibson, Joaquin Phoenix, Rory Culkin and Abigail Breslin. So when you see the two names that I've just mentioned, M. Night Shyamalan and Mel Gibson, you know you're in for a very divisive film. And Signs is definitely one of M. Night Shyamalan's, I would say, Marmite films, because he's had his absolute classics, things like The Sixth Sense, he's had things like Split, he's had things like, Unbreakable, and, in the good side of Shyamalan, but he's also had some complete duds. And I think Signs falls closer for me to the side of his brilliance. Because I think there's something about Signs that's a film that once you scratch the surface, surface level, it's very much okay, alien invasion, yep, okay, that's it. But dig a bit deeper, some of the character dialogue is very perfectly placed in moments. Signs is a brilliantly orchestrated film by Shyamalan, and I have to say that. And it's not a film that relies solely on a twist either. It genuinely is engaging. You're always kind of wondering, because you're very much drip-fed information throughout this film. It is not an exposition dump at any point. You're consistently wondering, okay, so how did that happen? How did that happen? I've only got a little bit of dialogue here to build on. Can I get more? Can I get more? And that's how the film goes from beat to beat. There's always that mystery element. Certainly, even as you get to the end, there's always an ambiguous feel with Signs, kind of from the minute it starts to the minute it ends. It's about crop circles that form in a Pennsylvania, the outskirts of Pennsylvania, and it's a farm, and obviously Mel Gibson is the father in this family that lives on the farm, and you're as in the dark as this family is. So it's kind of the audience's shared experience with this family that's already a dysfunctional family, but the characters in it are played well. I mean, Mel Gibson, I'm not the biggest fan of, I have to say. And also, I have to say, we're not talking Braveheart levels of Mel Gibson here either. But it's one of his better performances, I would say. I do like him in this. And he brings a lot of emotion to the character, to the father role, and his dynamic, especially with Joaquin Phoenix, the way they bounce off each other. And Joaquin Phoenix has definitely been in better roles than this, but I think Joaquin Phoenix plays the perfect role to elevate Mel Gibson's character as the father. You add to that, you've got Rory Culkin and Abigail Breslin, who are both, as child actors, there certainly is a quality to them that is far better than a lot of child acting, especially around the time of this release. We're talking, this is 3 years after The Phantom Menace, and yippee! So it's we've seen bad child acting around this time. We've seen very good child acting in other films. This probably lies closer to the good side than the bad. Signs is a brilliantly crafted film, I've already mentioned that, but it is also, I would certainly acknowledge it's a Marmite film. I like this, and I watched this at quite a young age, and also there was the terrifying element. There was a point whenever I watched this, there genuinely is not jump scares, but terrifying moments, especially as a younger viewer of the film. But you watch it back now, and I thought that maybe it was another film that I just had in my head that I liked more than I did. No, Signs is good. Signs is good. It's not an absolutely elite film, don't get me wrong, but Signs is a film that I think deserves more praise than hate. And I know some people like to maybe hate on this film. I certainly don't echo that at all. Signs is certainly a good watch. What I would certainly admit, though, before I move on to the next one, is the CGI for the aliens. Oh, spoiler, there's aliens in it. The CGI for the aliens is beyond dated. It's very noticeable. That's something that could do with an HD remaster, a 4K remaster. That's not going to happen because this film is completely forgot about. And I had nearly forgot about it myself, but I haven't. So, that's Signs. Give it a go if you're a Shyamalan fan, or you like the kind of direction that he gives his films. This certainly is one of his better ones in my opinion. Let's move on to the next one. Number 4. Lilo and Stitch is written and directed by Chris Sanders and Dean Dubois, and is produced of course by Disney. So you've probably come onto this video and you're thinking this is going to be Oscar-worthy films and these genuine epic tales that are blockbusters and things like that. And don't get me wrong, that is probably going to be, 95% of all these films that are featured throughout this series. But don't forget, this is films that I just love, and there is something about Lilo and Stitch. And I always said growing up that this film had a certain charm to it. But I watched it again recently, and I was thinking at the back of my mind before I did start watching, I thought maybe I was just kind of building on my own hype of the film, and maybe it was just to the point where it actually wasn't true. Lilo and Stitch is actually really good. Really good. The message of the beautifully told message of family and kind of adoption. I mean, it's if you told someone that the plot details were an alien falls to Earth and becomes stuck with this family, that could be E.T., that could be any other of those. I'm sure there's a few things that fall into that category, but this film is so different. It actually, now I've said that, it does hit a few of the beats of E.T. as well. It is that kind of, it's kind of, they start at the same point. Alien comes to Earth, but the direction they go in is slightly different. I don't know. And I've only just thought of that as I'm talking. That's not, written down or anything. That is something that's just come to me as I'm talking here. Anyway, let's talk about Lilo and Stitch and not E.T. There's I keep saying, but there is something about this film. There's a lovely little charm, and that probably comes not only from the Hawaiian culture throughout this, and that's also, I would say, a beautiful advertisement for Hawaiian culture in general. It's just lovely the way they, the music throughout, a lot of, Hawaiian music with the instruments and things like that, throughout. But also, not only Hawaiian music, this film is filled with what I would class as some of Elvis's greatest hits. Lilo is a big fan of Elvis and the story. She tries to teach Stitch about Elvis, and that leads to some of the more memorable parts of the film, but also some of the great, you've got Burning Love, you've got Suspicious Minds, you've got Devil in Disguise, all the hits are in here, and that really is a great soundtrack for the film, as well as the Hawaiian songs throughout. There's a brilliant song in the middle of the film called Hawaiian Roller Coaster Ride, which is a personal favourite of mine. It's one of the, you've got all the great Disney songs over the years, and all the films have their what you would say is their tag. Things like Frozen has Let It Go, things like Toy Story, you've got A Friend in Me. This is Hawaiian Roller Coaster Ride for Lilo and Stitch, and it's a great wee tune, I have to say. But another thing I should also mention is Stitch himself. There's something about the character Stitch that is, it's some of the mannerisms, the voice, the probably cuteness, is that the word? I don't know, but there's something about Stitch. It's just one of those characters. I am talking way too long about a kids film. Lilo and Stitch. If you've not seen it, give it a go. I'm giving this like the full treatment that it's this Oscar-worthy picture. Lilo and Stitch is great fun. It's better than a kids movie should be. It tells a good message, but I am. As was about to go into full plot details there and all that stuff. What's the point? It's Lilo and Stitch. Lilo and Stitch is great. If you haven't seen it, give it a go. Let me know what you think. Let's move on to the next one.
Number 3.
Red Dragon is directed by Brett Ratner and stars Anthony Hopkins, Edward Norton, and Ray Fiennes. So if you're not aware already, Red Dragon is the prequel to one of the greatest films I would personally say ever made, that is Silence of the Lambs, an absolutely fantastic film. And Red Dragon is the prequel and in some ways the origin story. It is based on a book by Thomas Harris, and obviously includes Anthony Hopkins in his most iconic character, Hannibal Lecter. But I wouldn't say it's his film. He gives a fantastic performance in it, and he is definitely an amazing addition, and certainly see where he is before he meets Jodie Foster's character, Clarice Starling, in Silence of the Lambs. It's more of an eye-opener for him, but it's also interesting to see how he interacts with different characters, and that different character especially is Edward Norton in this film. Edward Norton in Red Dragon is one of my favourite Edward Norton performances. He is absolutely. This is a film that obviously everybody loves. Silence of the Lambs. Most people love Silence of the Lambs, I would imagine. It's one of those iconic films, certainly of the 90s, and is a film that, you know, deserves the acclaim it gets. And Jodie Foster's character, it's one of her greatest performances, if not her most iconic performance, as well as Anthony Hopkins. But Edward Norton in this, and also Ray Fiennes in this, which I'll get to in a minute. This I think Red Dragon gets forgot about a lot, and it was a film that I actually didn't know existed. I knew of Silence of the Lambs, and I really enjoyed it, and I was like, okay, so what else is there? Is there a sequel? Is there a prequel? What have we got? And I seen that Red Dragon was the prequel, so I went and gave this a watch, and this film absolutely stands on its own. This is a really I definitely should say this is not at the level of Silence of the Lambs, but it is a worthy prequel, a worthy addition to the story, and some really good performances. Edward Norton, as I've already mentioned, is very good in this as the retired FBI agent that is tasked with hunting down this serial killer, and actually goes to Hannibal Lecter for aid or certainly advice on what's the best tactic, and the serial killer in question is Ray Fiennes' character, and Ray Fiennes is really good in this as well. Ray Fiennes is good in a lot of things, as you can imagine, and he plays a villain very well. He is one of the most iconic villains probably there is in Lord Voldemort in the Harry Potter series, but I actually think he's a lot more menacing in this. He's a real dangerous threat in this. He's sadistic and thrilling. It's one of my favourite Ray Fiennes performances as well. So it has got both Edward Norton and Ray Fiennes, and certainly up there with two of my favourite performances in each of their respective roles. Plus you've got Anthony Hopkins. There is no way that Red Dragon is not going to be great. And the story itself, it's absolutely in the same ilk that Silence of the Lambs is. So this is a film that you may not have heard of, and if you haven't seen Silence of the Lambs, I would definitely say watch that before this. But Red Dragon, definitely. If you really enjoy Silence of the Lambs the way I do, Red Dragon is definitely the next film on your list to watch after that. If you left Silence of the Lambs wanting more, this is exactly that, and it's what I always say. Whether it's a prequel or a sequel, it should build on the source material. Red Dragon improves Silence of the Lambs infinitely, and that's why it's so good, and it's definitely worthy to be on this list. Let's move on to the next one.
Number 2.
The Pianist is directed by Roman Polanski and is based on the memoir of Władysław Szpilman, a Polish-Jewish pianist during World War II based in a Warsaw ghetto, and he's played by Adrian Brody absolutely fantastically in what I would describe as the performance of a lifetime from him. So when it comes to talking about movies in general, I try to at least be generally happy when I'm talking about films, or enthusiastic certainly. The Pianist is a heartbreaking film, a heartbreakingly real film as well. It is a film that I absolutely appreciate the craftsmanship that's went into making this film as real as it is, but this is a hard-hitting film. It is a gut punch of reality, is how I would describe this film to people. It pulls absolutely no punches, and even to subtle details in this film. The backdrop, there is very little colour in this film to really emphasise and hit home the bleak reality of what is happening, and that is, and it's a real. It's hard not to be emotional watching this film because it is so true to all accounts. There's so much in here that you read about or you've heard about, certainly in the past, or maybe in your history class at school, and maybe you don't take it in. There's no part of this that is. There's no part of The Pianist as a film that is happy. Is that the word? Is it maybe not? Maybe happy is the wrong word, but it's maybe better to focus on how devoid of happiness it is from basically start to finish. There's a bit of colour in the backdrops of the film and just the lighting on the early scenes, and as reality sets in of what happened during World War II and the what happened with the Germans and the Polish Jews, it's a hard watch, this one, guys. I'll be honest. It's a hard watch. But it's absolutely masterful in its. How do you? I'm trying to think of the best way to describe this by doing it justice, because I don't want to say, oh, this is a brilliant film and you'll love this. You'll not love this, because I don't love this, because I hate that this is real. That's where I lie on this. But maybe it's better for me to focus on Adrien Brody. Adrien Brody as an actor is someone that seems to pop up here, there, and everywhere, but it hasn't really been in massive. I mean, there's two. There's this and there's King Kong. And I mean, King Kong, I mean Peter Jackson's King Kong, of course, not Kong Skull Island or any of the other iterations of that film. Adrien Brody in that is fine. I mean, he's not amazing. Adrien Brody in The Pianist is one of the greatest performances I have seen in film. Adrien Brody in this film is the driving force of how real this is, and a very subtle detail that I actually really appreciate, and it shows that the talent that Adrien Brody or Władysław Spielman in the film and in real life, of course, it's based on a true story, sadly. His piano playing, his musical talent, and the tunes he would play on the piano is the soul happy music in this whole film. The film does have a score, and the score consists completely of kind of sorrowful orchestral music throughout. There is no happy or optimistic score in this film. The only time there is beautiful and kind of emotionally happy music is played by Adrien Brody or Władysław Spielman in the film itself, when he does manage to get on the piano, and that's a nice touch, and it really, I think it signifies more about the music of the music is maybe what got him through all this scenario. It's a brutal film, guys. It's a brutal film, but it's fantastic. It's a film that I mean, I didn't go into this thinking I'm going to be watching a real optimistic or happy film, but it really does. It lingers with you, this film. I have to say, I watched it recently again for doing this video, and I remembered how, I mentioned earlier about my history class, or I'm sure a lot of you guys, when you were at school, it would have been the same, where you hear about these awful atrocities that happened during World War II with the Jewish people, and it's harrowing. It's a harrowing film experience, but it's so important. It's so important. It's so vital that the story was told and produced so well in cinema. It's absolutely expertly directed by Roman Polanski. It's one of his best. I would say it's up there. It probably is his best. Yeah, I'd go with that. It probably is his best, and it definitely is Adrian Brody's best performance. And the Academy certainly acknowledged that. He won a Best Oscar, a Best Actor for a leading role, absolutely deserved. And it also won 2 other Oscars. So it's a film that it was received with the acclaim that it deserved. But it's a rough experience, and if you haven't seen it before, I would say get yourself into the right mindset before watching it. It's a hard hitter, but it's absolutely fantastic. But it's not my number one, because my number one for this year is number 1. The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers is directed by Peter Jackson, is based on the book by J.R.R. Tolkien, and again stars Elijah Wood, Sir Ian McKellen, Sean Astin, Dominic Monaghan, Billy Boyd, Viggo Mortensen, Orlando Bloom, and John Rhys-Davies. So if you're new to the channel, I should probably start by saying The Lord of the Rings is the be-all and end-all for me when it comes to movie experiences, filmmaking, storytelling. The Lord of the Rings is the absolute pinnacle of that, and I've spoke briefly about that previously in one of my other videos that you will have to find for yourself. But The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers is when the Fellowship has a certain quality to it, The Two Towers has the same brilliant quality, but The Two Towers makes it into more of what feels like a grander scale. Certainly when it comes to the lore of the world, the Middle Earth that they're set in. And while in the Fellowship there was the dynamic of the 9 against the world, really, but not in a sense that the whole world knows they exist. It's more of a secret mission until more and more find out about them. That carries into the Two Towers, but the difference is they're split up and they're now on their own separate adventures. And that's something that on paper you would think, oh well, one of the best things about the Fellowship is the dynamic with each other. Once these characters are split up and interacting with new characters, will that not take away from the engagement side of things? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There is a point in the Two Towers that you realise how important that all these characters are, but you actually realise how well they interact and they build on the lore with other characters, other factions, other dynamics, and that there is no better example in that than Gollum or Smeagol, depending on how nice you are to him. Gollum is what I would say still the greatest CGI achievement in cinema, because this is 2002, this is not 2020. Gollum genuinely looks real. At the time he looked real, and this is when things were on video. This is not Blu-ray, this is not 4K. Gollum truly, and Andy Serkis playing him. I mean, I don't need to add to the list of accomplishments that Andy Serkis has achieved at this point when it comes to CGI, but our motion capture, I should say. Gollum is fantastic, and his dynamic with Frodo and Sam in this is what you would probably describe as the center point of the story, because there is a lot going on. You basically have 3 stories being told. You have Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, who are on the hunt to find Merry and Pippin. So they're the 3 stories. You have Frodo and Sam still on the quest to destroy the ring. You have Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli trying to save Merry and Pippin and ended up on their own adventure into Rohan. And you have Merry and Pippin with the Ents of I was going to say Isengard, it's not Isengard. The Ents of Fangorn, which there are 3 stories and they're all connected, but they feel on absolute different ends of the continent, which they are in certain instances. And the dynamic works so well, and that's something that, as I mentioned with the Fellowship, with all the characters interacting with each other and the epic scale, but it's the close-knit of the Fellowship itself. The Two Towers build the dynamic into this massive world, and if they had got that wrong, it wouldn't have worked. It really wouldn't have worked, But because all actors are doing such a good job, the character writing is still as good, and it certainly is something that it has to be so tight-knit for this to work, to introduce these new characters. And the new characters introduced are fantastic. You've got the characters of Rohan, you've got Gollum, you've got Treebeard with Merry and Pippin. You've got all these different characters that in isolation they have to be introduced organically and well, and they do it absolutely perfectly. Within about 2 scenes, you're connected to the new characters nearly the same way you are with the original Fellowship, and that's something that really has to be commended that they've achieved in this, and certainly that comes down to the direction and the writing of this. And while I've talked a lot about different plot details and how things are set up there, the bread and butter of the Two Towers and what it leads up to, along with the Ents march on Isengard and Frodo and Sam in Osgiliath, the bread and butter and the kind of the centre point of this film is the Battle of Helm's Deep, with Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli joining the battle with Rohan against Isengard. Now, if you've not watched Lord of the Rings, those names probably mean absolutely nothing to you, but if you do, you know exactly what I'm about to say. The Battle of Helm's Deep is quite simply, for me, and I would imagine there's some people that would argue a few different things, I just don't think anything comes close, bar maybe what happens in Return of the King. We'll get there when we get there. But the Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, with the thing that holds it, the thing that everybody remembers, and everybody goes, oh my god, that was amazing, and the thing that people would say, and I did mention this when I talked about Fellowship, some people say Fellowship's their favourite, some people say Return of the King's their favourite, some people say Two Towers. The reason people say The Two Towers is their favourite is because the Battle of Helm's Deep and the kind of last hour of The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers is as good an hour of film as there's ever been. It's quite simply that good, because not only do you have the intercut dynamics with Frodo and Sam and the situation they're in, you have the Merry and Pippin situation with the Ents and the trees, I suppose, if you're not in with the lore. But Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli at Helm's Deep, it's hard to put into words how perfect the Battle of Helm's Deep is. It shows the epic scale, these grandioso battles that storytelling can do, and when done right can be achieved to such a high quality. The Lord of the Rings and the Two Towers, when it comes to talking about just it as a film, and if somebody says to you, oh, did you like the Two Towers, instantly you're thinking about Aragorn on the wall directing the elves shooting the arrows down into the Uruk-hai. That is something that is ingrained in your brain. I would imagine even if you're not a big Lord of the Rings fan, you would still have to admire and be in awe of this, what they've achieved in this last hour of the film. I don't want to go into too many plot details, especially if you haven't seen the film, but if you have, you know what I'm talking about. The Battle of Helm's Deep is truly a masterpiece, and it's something that I just can't see being topped on how well written, well directed, well acted, and even just the atmosphere. You know, before the battle even starts, it's kind of dark and dreary, and then as soon as the enemy arrives, the rainfall comes, and it starts just the sound of it hitting off the steel helmets. Something very simplistic, but also it's just, it is so, even thinking, do you know what, Zach is video up, I'm going to watch it, back in a minute. Rather just watch it again, that was amazing. It's so good! It's so good. What else do I need to say? I'm not going to go into too many more details. A few other things I should mention. I mentioned it before. The score by Howard Shore is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's a 10 out of 10 film score. There is absolutely no way. There's so much I could say about any Lord of the Rings film, and I don't want to just go, this is what happens, and this is what happens, and I like this, and I like this. There is so much to love. There is genuine, every time I watch it, it doesn't matter what age I am, when I watch it as a younger child, when I watch it as a teenager, when I watch it as an adult, I feel more and more love for what they've achieved in the Lord of the Rings films. And the Two Towers, on the epic scale that it has, is a shining example of that. And that is definitely why it is my number one for the year 2002. So that's been the year 2002. Overall, I would say a good year with some real standout films. Things like, as we mentioned, Lord of the Rings, The Pianist, absolutely. Pianist on any other year without a Lord of the Rings film is probably the number one. And I wouldn't dispute someone who said that's their film of the year. Some other films in there. I mean, Lilo and Stitch. Lilo and Stitch is one of those films. It's one of those, like, it's not really a guilty pleasure because I do genuinely think it's a great film and the message being told. It just is not maybe something you'd expect on a video like this. And I would admit that this film, this year of film, and actually I found that the more years I go through, each year seems to have like, it seems to be between 2 and maybe 10 really good films. And it's just a case of picking them, but some years are are a lot stronger than others. And as you can imagine, things like Lilo and Stitch and Signs, and this is not me discrediting them because I do genuinely like them, as I've mentioned, and I do think they deserve a place on this list because of what films were released this year. But I would certainly admit, if there was a lot more films released in the year 2002, I don't know that they would have made the list. And that applies certainly throughout the series, and that probably will continue. Some years are stronger than others, that's just how it works. But yes, we had The Lord of the Rings, and I mean, at this point, what can I say about Lord of the Rings? What have I got to add? I'm sure Return of the King will appear when we get there, and I will have to find something new to say about something I think I've said everything twice now about. So yeah, that's the year 2002. Genuinely, I do think it was a good year though, and I know I've said that maybe some films were maybe slightly luckier than others to get the top 5. That's just the nature of the business, isn't it, guys? Just the nature. What am I talking about? The nature of the business. It's a YouTube video. Anyway, before you know what's happening, I'm about to start going on a waffle here. I'm not going to bother, I'm just going to close this out. I really hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, and you want to hear more of 5 of the best, or anything else that I'm doing on the channel, a like and subscribe would be so appreciated. You just don't know how much that would mean. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye, guys. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Before you go, here are some of my other videos. For updates and information on upcoming videos, the best place to find this is my Twitter. Much love, everyone.